Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Hey everyone, I've got a crazy story to share with you, and it all happened with my entitled neighbor Karen. You won't believe the nerve she had. So I live in this nice little suburban neighborhood, right? One day, I'm out in my front yard tending to my roses when Karen storms up to me. "Hey you!" she yells. I look up kind of surprised. Hi Karen, what's up?" She just stands there with her hands on her hips and gives me this smug look. "I need to talk to you about something very important." I'm thinking, okay, what could be so important? I put down my gardening tools and say, "Sure, what's on your mind?" And that's when she drops the bombshell. She goes, "You know, I've been thinking, and you should put me in your well." I blink a few times, totally taken aback. "What? Are you serious?" Karen nods like it's the most obvious thing in the world. "Absolutely. It's only fair, you know?" I couldn't believe it. "Karen, my will is for my family and loved ones, not my neighbors. Plus, what brought this up?" She crosses her arms and gets all huffy. "Well, I've been such a good neighbor to you, and I think I deserve it." I'm thinking, what in the world? I try to reason with her. "Karen, I appreciate the neighborly gestures and all, but that's not how wells work. They are meant for family, not neighbors." Karen's face turns all red and she starts getting louder. "I've done so much for you. I deserve to be in your well." I'm getting a bit fed up at this point. "Karen, I can't believe you're even asking for this. It's not happening." And then here is a kicker. She points her finger right at me and says, "If you don't do it, there will be consequences." I'm thinking, what kind of neighbor demands to be in your well and threatens you if you refuse? It was unreal, seriously. And I had a bad feeling that this was just the beginning of a crazy story that I was about to live through. A few days after our first chat, I thought things might have blown over. But oh boy, was I wrong. One evening, I hear a knock on my front door, and who else could it be but Karen? I open the door and she's standing there with a plate of freshly baked cookies. Like everything is perfectly normal. "Hey John," she says, all fake friendly. I'm a bit cautious this time. "Hey Karen, what brings you here?" She waltzes right in without an invitation and plunks the plate of cookies on my coffee table. "I've been thinking, John, about your well." I can't believe it. She's bringing this up again. "Karen, I already told you, my will is for my family. Are you planning on killing me or what?" Karen doesn't even blink. "Well, I just think you should include me. It's only right." I'm trying to stay calm, but this is beyond frustrating. "Karen, it doesn't work that way. Wells are for family and close friends, not neighbors." She folds her arms and gets all snooty. "I've been a great neighbor to you, and I deserve to be in your well." I can feel my patience wearing thin. "Karen, being a good neighbor doesn't mean you get a spot in my well." And then she does it again, just like before. She points her finger at me and says, "If you don't do it, there will be consequences." I'm thinking, what is it with this woman? "Karen, I am not putting you in my well, and you can't threaten me into doing it." She huffs and puffs, but eventually leaves my house. I am left wondering if this entitled neighbor of mine is ever going to give up. This whole situation is getting crazier by the day. So a few days after Karen demanded to be in my well again, I decided it was time to talk to my lawyer. I needed some advice on how to handle this mess. After consulting with my lawyer, I am heading home one evening and I open my front door and there she is, Karen, waiting for me. She's not holding cookies this time. Nope, she's holding something else. A small silver pistol. I can't believe my eyes. I feel my heart race and my stomach drops. "John," she says all calmly, "I told you what would happen if you didn't listen to me." My voice shakes as I try to reason with her. "Karen, please, put the gun down. We can talk about this." But Karen's lost it. She raises the gun, her hand trembling with anger. I'm trapped in my own doorway, and I'm thinking this is it. This is how it ends. I am slowly inching my hand towards my pocket, where my cell phone is, hoping I can call for help without her noticing. And I manage to call 911 with the phone inside my pocket and let the dispatcher hear what's going on. I can't risk making any sudden moves. The seconds feel like hours, and I just pray someone hears or sees what's going on. It's a moment I'll never forget, and I hope nobody ever has to go through anything like this. All I could do was try to stay calm and hope for a miracle. As Karen's trembling hand held that pistol steady, I started to back away from her. I had one hand in my pocket, clutching my cell phone, praying the police would come soon. Karen, please, let's not do anything we regret. She didn't say a word, just stared at me with a look that sent shivers down my spine. The silence was deafening. Then out of nowhere, I heard sirens in the distance. My heart pounded with relief because I knew help was on the way, but Karen, she didn't budge. She kept that gun aimed at me. The police cars pulled up and the officers surrounded us. They had their guns drawn and ordered Karen to put the weapon down. It was tense, let me tell you. I kept thinking, please let this end peacefully. A negotiator started talking to Karen through a megaphone, trying to talk her down. It was a nerve-wracking standoff, and I just wanted it to be over. I prayed that Karen would make the right choice and surrender. But she was fixated on something, I don't know what, but she didn't listen to a word I said. It was like she was in her own world, and it was a really scary place. The police negotiator was doing their best, saying, Karen, think about what you're doing. This won't end well for you. I could hear the urgency in their voice, and I just wanted this nightmare to be over. It felt like hours, but it was only minutes until Karen finally, slowly lowered the gun to the floor. The tension in the room didn't ease up until the police rushed in and secured the weapon. They handcuffed Karen and led her away, and I felt this huge wave of relief wash over me. The whole neighborhood was watching, and I knew they had witnessed the whole ordeal. It was a moment I'll never forget, and I hoped that it was finally the end of this entitlement-fueled nightmare. The police stayed a while taking statements from me and some neighbors who had witnessed the whole scary scene. I was so thankful for their help and support. But the trauma for that day didn't just go away. I started having nightmares and I couldn't shake the fear that I might run into Karen again. I realized I needed some help to deal with the anxiety and fear that were lingering. So I decided to start attending therapy sessions to cope with the aftermath. Talking to a professional helped me make sense of the whole crazy situation and gave me strategies to manage the fear and stress that had taken over my life. One day, I got a letter in the mail that instantly filled me with dread. It was a summons to testify at Karen's trial. I knew it was important to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions, but the thought of seeing her again in court sent shivers down my spine. I reached out to my lawyer and she assured me that testifying was crucial to ensuring Karen was held accountable. She explained that with my eyewitness account, the prosecution had a strong case against Karen for attempted murder, assault, and other charges. Reluctantly, I agreed to testify. The day of the trial came and as I entered the courtroom, Karen was sitting there, looking surprisingly calm given the gravity of the situation. During the trial, the prosecution asked me to recount the events of that horrific day. I had to relive the horrifying moments when Karen demanded to be in my will and then pointed a gun at me. So after I testified at Karen's trial, I thought it was all over, but it wasn't. The court had to decide on her punishment. I was called back for the sentencing hearing and I wasn't sure what to expect. During the hearing, I had to share how the incident had affected me personally. I explained the anxiety and fear that still lingered and how it had disrupted my daily life. Karen, on the other hand, seemed unrepentant. She didn't show any remorse for what she had put me through. Her defense attorney tried to argue for leniency, but it was clear that Karen's actions had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. In the end, the judge handed down a sentence that included a 10-year prison time for Karen. It was a relief to know that she would be behind bars away from me and the community. The judge also ordered mandatory anger management counseling for her and a restraining order to protect me and my family. I could finally breathe a little easier knowing she wouldn't be lurking around the neighborhood or making outrageous demands. It felt like a weight had been lifted. In the days that followed, I received numerous messages from friends and neighbors offering their congratulations and support. A few months had passed since Karen was put behind bars, and a car pulled up to the curb, and it was Karen's sister, Lisa. I hadn't seen her in ages, and I had no idea she was visiting. Lisa got out of her car and approached us with a nervous smile. "John, I am really sorry about what happened with Karen. I had no idea she was behaving like that." "Thanks, Lisa. It's been tough, but we will get through it." But then Lisa surprised me. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive Karen someday. I won't bore you with the details, but let's just say she's been through a lot." "Lisa, I appreciate your concern, but what Karen did was really dangerous. Forgiveness might take time." Lisa looked down, clearly disappointed. "I understand. I just wish things could be different." As she left, I couldn't help but wonder about Karen's family dynamics and the reasons behind her entitled behavior. The encounter with Lisa left me reflecting on forgiveness and whether it would ever be possible. It was a thought-provoking moment in an ongoing journey of recovery and healing. My family immigrated to America in the 1880s and settled in Nebraska. We were farmers for the first 80 years or so, but back in the 1960s, my great-grandma decided she was going to sell the entire farm before she died and simply give her sons 1/3 of the money for the inheritance when she passed. She had 3 sons. In 1969, my great-grandma passed, and her 3 sons inherited the money she had earned from selling the farm. My grandpa decided he would basically let that money sit until after he retired from the military. In 1971, he deployed to Vietnam for his second and final deployment. At the end of his deployment, he returned to Nebraska and retired after 22 years in the service. Now, he had an old Chevy truck at the time and was in the process of building a concrete business with the money he had gotten from his inheritance. Well, during this time, his truck engine blew up. My grandma was busy at the time and he didn't want to fool with the truck because he was busy. So he brought himself the engine he wanted to replace it with, which was an upgrade, and he went down to the only garage in town and asked him if they would be willing to put the engine in the truck. They agreed on a price and told him to come back in a week or so. A week later, my grandpa comes back and picks up the truck. He admits that he felt like a fool for not double-checking the work, but assumed, since this was the son of his friend, that the son would do right by him. This was a small town. Well, my grandpa opens up the concrete business and he's busy. And it comes time for his first oil change. This is about 4 months after he got the truck back. He's doing the oil change and notices that the engine he bought isn't the engine in his truck. It's a smaller engine. This obviously pisses him off, so he storms on down to the garage and talks to the shop. Earl was the owner. Earl comes out and denies any wrongdoing, says he did as he was told, and it shouldn't have taken him 4 months to bring the issue up. My grandma tells Earl he needs to do what's right, and Earl refuses. It is important to know that this is a small town. Written contracts and so forth really isn't a thing. Your worth is your word. My grandma tells Earl he's going to get him for this. Earl laughs and tells him to leave his shop. My grandpa goes down to the county and requests the record for who owns that gas station. Turns out it's an old family friend named Harold. My grandpa stops by Harold's house and starts inquiring about the business deal. Harold says, well, Earl rents the gas station/garage from him. My grandpa asks Harold, how's everything going? And Harold confides that Earl hasn't paid his rent in 2 months. My grandpa asks, do you have a written lease with Earl? To which Harold goes, nah, I sure don't. My grandpa then asks, what if I bought the gas station/garage from you? Harold isn't completely on board with the idea, but my grandpa makes a strong point. Earl isn't paying his rent. Harold doesn't seem like he has much interest in being a landlord anymore. And my grandpa has the cash to buy the place outright. Harold, sensing something is up, asks my grandpa, did Earl do something to you? You seem awfully interested in this garage. Ain't you busy with that concrete business of yours? And my grandpa fills Harold in on the story. My grandpa also mentions that he has a son, my father, who needs something to do, and he'd be happy to buy the whole building from Harold for a fair price. And what happens after that is his business. Also, it's important to note, when Harold decided to rent this business to Earl, and that deal went to all the equipment and tools that Harold had acquired over the years, so those belonged to the building. Harold and my grandpa came to a number that they both agreed on. A few days later, my grandpa paid Harold in cash, in full for the business. The paperwork is done and my grandpa is now the proud owner of a gas station and mechanics shop. Now my grandpa senses that Earl ain't going to be pleased when my grandpa fires Earl. So for extra good measure, my grandpa calls up the local sheriff, who is a high school friend, and asks the sheriff to come with him to break the news to Earl. So my grandpa and the sheriff go down to Earl's now former business and they walk in, and before my grandpa can say hello, Earl says, now I told you, I didn't cheat you. My grandpa smiles and says, I'm not here about my truck. I'm here to fire you. Earl, with a look of confusion on his face, asks, you can't fire me. I own this business. My grandpa shows him the title and says, I am now the owner of this building. To which Earl fires back, but I got a deal with Harold. And the sheriff speaks up. You do? Do you have a lease? Well, no, Earl says, to which the sheriff smiles and says, in that case, you're going to need to take your stuff and leave. Earl is fuming pissed, grabs his toolbox and storms out. My grandpa ended up hiring the mechanic that would occasionally work on his trucks at his concrete business. He had my aunts and grandma run the gas station full-time, and my dad would work there after school. We owned a garage for 25 years before my grandpa sold it to someone else. This happened a few years ago. My neighbors started parking on the street behind my car, like literally inches for no apparent reason. My neighbor has a driveway, empty, and also lives 2 houses down the street. I don't have a driveway, so on-street parking is a must for me. So after a few weeks, I asked if it was necessary to park so close when there were literally no cars on the street for over a quarter mile. He said no, but there is no law against it, with a big grin on his face. A few weeks pass by and my car gets hit because someone thought there was enough room to clear as his truck blocked the view of my car entirely. I see this happen, but unfortunately can't get a model or license plate number. I found my neighbor's email address because I really didn't feel like talking to him and asked him again if he could just park further down the road, closer to his house. He replied, nope, suck on it. Okay. I had lived here for quite a long time and never had any issues with him or any other neighbor. I keep to myself, never make noise, don't have any noisy pets or parties and so on. His truck has his business name on it. I Google it, find out it is his own business, lots of Yelp reviews, BBB rating, and so on. All these links point to his website. I go to check his website, it doesn't load up. I head over to Whois and see that the domain isn't registered. I snag it. Before I think of what to do with it, I Google the owner's name and find out he's been convicted of murdering a child 20-ish years ago. I find a handful of links that details his story rather explicitly. I copy-paste all those links into an email to him, a throwaway account so he can't just reply to me as I deleted it afterward. Said something like, well, if you want to be a jerk for no reason, I just bought your business domain. Here is all the links I plan on posting on it. I don't have to list your business name because all of your business listings across the internet have this URL pointing to it. Keep parking like a jerk. Yes, it's legal, but you are willfully doing this just to annoy me. I legally bought your domain and can legally link these articles. Park behind me again, and I will launch it. Within an hour, his truck was moved into his driveway. He asked me for the domain and I told him, when either you move or I move, I will hand it over. Until then, it'll remain offline.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.